Welcome back to Link by Golf. I'm your host Ross Maguire. It's been a little bit of a break over the summer. I felt it was only fair to let all of you have a break from my voice. But the great news is I've got some fantastic guests lined up for Season 2, which is about to kick off. In this first episode, I'm really delighted to be joined by Stevie Carmichael. Stevie is a former Scotland international, a fantastic player, and these days he works for Trackman. I've split the episode into two parts, so in this first part Stevie talks about his Scotland days, and then I'll be releasing a follow-up pod for the second part where Stevie talks about Trackman and many other pieces. Thanks for listening to Link by Golf again. Let's go over to the pod. Stevie, great to see you. How you doing?
Very well, thanks, Ross. Glad to be here.
Brilliant. And simple start to the podcast, Stevie. It is literally, where are you from and how did you get into golf?
Oof, how long you got? So
Plenty of time.
I grew up in Cardross, which is just between Dumbarton and Helensburgh. Basically only known for having a pretty good golf course, just your typical 3,000 or 4,000 folk village, and got into golf, I guess predominantly because there wasn't much else to do. That's probably it. I played football like every person or every boy from the west of Scotland. Had designs on being a footballer and then didn't become a footballer, as 99.9% of the folk are.
You played badminton.
Yeah, I played badminton. I played tennis. I've not got. I don't run with that story that almost everybody who's a male in the west of Scotland runs with, which is I could have been a player, but then I got a bad injury. Right. I just run more with that. I just wasn't good enough at football to be a footballer. So it was then into badminton and tennis and golf. My dad played golf. My dad was a single figure golfer, and was always, in my memory, was always involved in the golf club on committees and in the social convener. And I mean, that would have been early 80s. So golf clubs were doing well. You know, they were a social hub for the village. There was dances and all. I always remember mum and dad being involved. And one of my first golf memories actually is my dad getting a hole in one, which would have been 1982 or 83, something like that. Because he framed the ball. My uncle was like a talented craftsman guy, and he made a wee plinth for the ball. And I always remember it was a small size yellow pinnacle, and my dad had to endure the ignominy of having that in the house as his hole-in-one ball for the rest.
Super. That's a bit of a ball, isn't it?
Yellow pinnacle. It certainly cut through the air that day, right into the bin for a one. So yeah,
absolutely. So. You started getting into the golf, you got all the other sports going. What kind of age was it starting to be more serious for you, Stevie?
Oh, I was quite late on. So I started playing when I was young. I've got an older brother. My brother's a good player. He's a 4 or 5 handicapper, even now, and was a good player. Interesting, funky technique my brother's got. Not one that I would have copied myself, but he's always been a good player. And so that got me into it. You know, so I played football with him and his friends. I played golf with him and his friends when I was kind of 8 or 10. I joined when I was 10. I think we didn't have the grow the game thing going on back then, so you couldn't join until you were 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I got a membership for my 10th birthday. I started playing there. And then my football petered out when I was about 14 or 15. And that's when I really started playing golf. What I would class as seriously. Yeah.
And when you say seriously, was that going sort of beyond the club golf? Did you? Or was it a little bit later for that?
It was, it probably was. When I say seriously, I mean practicing. Right. I don't mean just going out in the course. I mean actually just trying to get a bit better at golf. I don't know if all the counties did it, but at that time, Dumbartonshire were I thought a fairly forward-thinking county in that the county boys team was an 8 or 10 man team, but the ninth and 10th players were always like young guys, so they weren't the lowest handicappers. So I started playing for the county boys, and at this point, from memory, I was probably a teens type handicap.
Wow.
But there was obviously potential, and we went. I remember playing my first game at Aberfoyle, and you just remember these things when the first time you pull on a jersey that isn't for your club. So that gave me experience of playing different places. I realised quite quickly, and obviously from my dad being a decent player and my brother, in order to get better at golf, you have to travel. I paint some broad strokes here, but almost anyone can master playing their own course very well. It's the ability to drop you into anywhere and be able to hold your own that makes you a decent player. So I did that and enjoyed it. And we're surrounded by good players. Obviously Charlie Green played at Dumbarton, but he lived in Cardress. So he used to practice at Cardress. Used to play a bit of golf with Charlie, and he was hugely generous in time and advice and stuff like that. I knew nothing about amateur golf, nothing at all. I didn't know what the tournaments were and things, so I kind of learned about as I got better, learned where I needed to go and play and so on and so forth.
And then I guess as you're going through that progression, Stevie, you start to get into like the county golf. You're playing obviously team games and things. When did you start that progression? You said going out and travelling. When was it sort of more, I'll just say serious, I guess, like a higher level of competition? When did that start changing for you?
It was relatively young. We used to go to boys' opens. So my best pals at a guy called Russell Thornton, who's a very good player as well. Well, better player than me at that time. And he, we used to travel to all the boys' opens. But like many golf clubs at that time, we would have 40 or 50 juniors at Cardress who were all, trying to get better in various standards, but decent players. So there would always be, there was the Helensburgh boys back then, there was St Andrews boys. I always remember going, in fact, one of the first prizes I remember winning was a voucher at Air Belle Isle. I won a voucher for like £3 and you had to spend it in the shop, and ended up buying a pack of lead tape. So I went home and like lead taped up at almost every club in my bag. Thought I was,
thought I was the ping 2 iron.
Everything.
Ping 2 iron skin of treatment.
I could hardly lift my bag. There was so much lead tape on it, but I thought that was the thing.
Decent way to spend £3 though.
Absolutely. Got myself £3, some lead tape, and probably some lead poisoning as well. But those were the days, eh?
But the good news is that didn't stop you progressing in your game, though, right?
No, it didn't. I mean,
you get beyond that as well.
I did have a bit of a desire. I mean, we've always been, as a family, my dad was a very good footballer. My brother is a very good tennis player even now, and was a tennis coach and badminton coach and stuff like that. Wow. We're always pretty competitive, so always had a desire to get better. Even when we played golf recently, I told you a story about how I became good at getting out of bunkers. And that was just because when I was these were the days where you didn't have junior courses or junior tees. We used to play off the back tees at Cardress, and there was some carries. It sounds silly now, but it'd maybe be 120 or 130 yards. I couldn't do that with my driver when I was 8 or 10. So you had to aim towards the ladies' tees and stuff like that, kind of plot your way around. Yep. And I remember a guy telling me, "Oh, you'll be fine, son. You'll be fine, but then you'll get stuck in bunkers. You'll not be able to get out of bunkers." And I thought, why's this old dude harshing my buzz here? I'm just trying to get better at golf, Yep. And I learned to get out of bunkers when I was a wee guy, and I was always, and still even now, even though I've had a big break from playing and I'm just getting back into it, I'm still a really, really good bunker player. It's just never ever left me, and that was
I can attest to that. I saw some worldies the last 2 times we've been out, which are just ridiculous.
I know, I'm still good at it, and I've always liked the challenge of that. If I hit a bad shot in a bunker, I'm like, okay, I'm in my head. Sometimes I vocalise it if I'm in the right frame of mind, but in my head I'll think, oh, this is quite good. It'll give me a chance to show people how good I am out of bunkers. but I enjoy the chat. I've always looked on it like that. If I miss a green, I'm like, right, all aboard the showboat here. Watch what I can do with my wedges, And I enjoy that. I've
That's
never been.
what Harrington talked about, right, when he won the Open. He was literally trying to just be like a kid again when he's dunked it in the water, and then he's going, I need to get this wedge stiff. There's no other option. Just need to show off here.
That because it was probably the biggest pressure shot of his career today, wasn't it? And he hit that like knee-high fizzer that you would never play.
That was like the Junior Open shot.
It was the old Turbolat and the Brune wedge, as I call it, but the copper wedge. And spin it back as hard as you can.
Absolutely. But then, Stevie, we need to get to even more progression for you. So you went way beyond the sort of county level and playing county games and got picked for Scotland. So what was the age that you first, I guess, got on the Scottish radar and started to make those steps?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit late. I didn't play boys or youths golf for Scotland.
Really? Wow, I didn't know that.
No, I didn't. I had a golf scholarship at Stirling Uni. So I was surrounded by really good Russell. My pal was there as well, Gordon Sherry.
Were you one of the sort of early people to do that then?
Yeah, I think the first one ever from memory was Colin Dalgleish.
Right.
Who's from Helensburgh. Colin's a bit older than me. So I think he was there maybe about 10 years before us. But I think he was the first one. And then I don't know how big a toehold it got, but certainly when I went there in 92, and it really started getting a hold. We had a very good crop of players, and we started attracting. There was a couple of Swedish girls who came over to Stirling who would normally have gone to American college.
Wow.
Maria Hjort and Anna Berg. Maria ended up, I think, being top 10 in the world. Played Solheim Cup and stuff like that. Wow. So, and Gordon Sherry was obviously, Gordy's a very good pal of mine, and he was different.
Was it biomed science or something he did at uni, wasn't it?
He did something like that. I always remember he used to, Russell and I did arts degrees, so it was like 6 hours a week of classes, and Gordy was always having to go to lab and wearing a big lab coat and basically having to put in a bit of a shift, which, to be honest, made his golf achievements at that time even more incredible, because he was actually having to do grafting as well as his degree. So that was when, in the lead up to that, I started playing pretty well. The British Youths in '93, I was runner-up in that at Gales. Lee Westwood won it, and I was runner-up. And started playing pretty well around there. Got better through my time at uni, but I played my first international match in '97.
Wow, so you finished second in British Youths in '93, and it was '97 before you played.
Yeah. Because the youths, I think the last British Youths was '94, because it became the British Youths and the British Amateur were basically the same field, because it was much younger guys. So they did away with the British Youths, I think, either '94 or '95, somewhere around there.
Wow.
Up till then, I'd played county golf, and I played for Dumbartonshire, obviously, with Graham Rankin, and Charlie still played. A chap called Fraser Hutchison was the team captain, and I enjoyed that. We never managed. We had a good team, but we never managed to win any area team championships or anything like that. I did end up winning an area team championship, but I got a Bosman move to Perth and Kinross. And won it with them later on in my career. So that was
back in the days when folk were waiving joining fees and all that kind of stuff.
I moved to Auchterarder and played for Perth and Kinross. But I had a very good record for Perth and Kinross because I was playing well. That was like later on. And they had a very good team from memory. Wallace Booth, Glenn Campbell was a great player. Steve Carruthers was a great player. Mark Cameron, Mark Rose, Tom McClevey, Kev, the late, sadly, Kev McAlpine played as well for Perth and Kinross. So they had a great team. And it's, I guess, how do you break into the national thing is always an interesting question, because when I think back of the county matches, there's a lot of really good players. like really good players, guys that I would look at on the team sheet and think, oh, gee, I don't fancy playing him. And they never kind of get beyond that county thing. I'm thinking guys, Stuart Meiklejohn in Fife, brilliant player. Gordon Tyre from Argyll and Bute was a brilliant player. Chris Campbell's dad, I can't remember, he played for the North, can't remember his name, but Chris played for Scotland, but his dad was a brilliant player. Guys like Ross Hinselwood that you'll know from Lanarkshire, Brian Smith, who's won more tournaments than you could ever imagine, never pegged it up for Scotland. So it's you've got to carry a wee bit of luck as well. The timing. I won the gold medal in '97 at Leven, and I think there've been quite a few. 90. I might get the date slightly wrong, but I think Stevie Gallagher had turned pro in '95. Alan Reid, Hugh McKibben, Big Sherry, and there was a hole in the in the squad. So if you won, if you won an Order of Merit event, suddenly you were. And I'd played well for a long period of time. I was a consistent player, but I think winning that one in '97 was the one that got me catapulted into my first international game.
And I guess I could have my dates wrong, but then that's after you finished uni. So you've.
Yeah, that was the year after. Yeah, I graduated in '90. I mean, the uni golf was brilliant. I mean, when I think back of my golf career, it's not the individual stuff you remember at all. It's the team things. I remember we used to play a Scottish unis tournament every year, and because we were bursars at Stirling, there was just an expectation that we would go and win that every year, and it's just not as easy as that.
No.
You have to. It's difficult.
I guess especially in Scotland as well, because although Stirling was attracting a lot of great players, then invariably a lot of very good players end up at other unis anyway, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and Dundee had a very good team, and so that was always. It was like our Scottish boys. It was the first week in April, and it was at Lossiemouth, and you'd have been practicing all winter. You'd throw open your curtains, and it was snowing. And you're like, all right, okay, we're back to bed, But they're the memories. I played in British unis teams. I played in the World Student Games, which was fantastic. I won the British Unis Championship.
Where was that?
I played in Madrid, and it was the closest. It was funny. I was watching the Olympics last week when I was on holiday, and it's the closest you get to that. I never managed to make it into Walker Cup or St Andrews Trophy, but so the closest I got was the World Student Games to that. Somebody holding the flag and you're marching along in your uniform, and that was a great experience. I look back on those things really fondly.
And I guess in that one, Stevie, any names from British golf that would sort of stick out that people would know?
Gee whiz, you're really testing my memory now.
Sorry.
the World Student Games was good fun, but there might have been some sand taken as well. Aye, so the memories are somewhat hazy. But it was a good trip. I played in World Pairs events and stuff like that as well. Graham McDowell played in that actually. He played for Ireland. Simon Mackenzie and I played from Scotland. That was in Venezuela, which was a bit of an adventure in Caracas. So awesome. I mean, I've got to see a bit of the world through just being very efficient at chipping and putting, which is a nice thing to be able to say.
I think that's downplaying your talent level.
I slightly, but I'm not. I've certainly never been able to hit it like Bryson, that's for sure. But efficient use of my ball. I could normally still see my ball after I'd hit it. And there's a bit to be said for that. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, it's incredible that you've been to all these tournaments, and that's before you get into the Scotland team and have all these experiences.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, the Stirling was great. We had a well organised. There was a chap called we referred to him as Doc Thompson. I think he was Professor Ian Thompson, and he was a real kind of visionary guy. And with Professor David Bell, who was an economics professor, these guys were doing it as well as their day job. They're proper jobs at the uni, and it was a well-oiled machine. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that period and playing in a team with the people you're living with and your pals. It was great. It really was a good time for sure.
Yeah, and then you started playing for Scotland. So What were some of those experiences like? Is that sort of home internationals and then having to play all the top tournaments?
Yeah, I played '97. My first game was against Italy in Italy, and I remember when they paired me up. My first foursomes match was with again the late Graham Lowson, and Graham. I don't know if you remember Lumpy. He's a huge character, and I became very very fond of him. But he was, to this day, still the best foursomes partner I ever had. He was a brash guy, Graham. And as a young guy playing your first cap, I was like, oh man, I'm just going to let this guy down. He could not have been any more supportive. He was fantastic, and certainly as I got later into my international career, or even playing in county games, I always thought back to how kind is the right word, he was to me as a guy and as a golfer, and I've always tried to be like that as a foursomes partner, because there was no worrying about hitting a bad shot. He just made you feel perfectly at ease, and of course, if you feel like that, you're going to play better. So there was method in his madness, but we had a great time in that event. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that'd been awesome.
Yeah, it was, and that was my first one. And then I played. A bit of a memory to should be ask my dad these questions. He'll dig out a scrapbook for you and bore you for 2 hours. But I played home internationals in '98, 99, 2001, 2002.
Wow.
And I know, those team things are great. I'd won a few Order of Merit events. I was always good in leaving. I was going to move through to their London Links or leaving just because I used to be able to play quite well there. So I won the Champion of Champions at leaving. I won the gold medal. I won the Sutherland Chalice at Dumfries and Galloway, sorry. There's always a distinction, isn't there, to be made there. South East District at Musselburgh. So I won, these, it doesn't sound like a huge list, but these things were difficult to win.
Especially the people that you've named who are in effectively your peer group that you're trying to beat, right?
Well, that's right. In any given season, Graham Rankin, the animal, would win 3 or 4 of them, and Lon Kelly would win 3 or 4 of them, and suddenly there's only 3 or 4 left for the rest of us to try and win. So to win any of them is something that gives me great pride. I actually took my boy. I did that dad thing. I've got twin boys, and I took them through to leaving to show them my name on the board. Look at my name on the board. They were hugely underwhelmed, but anyway, I still got to do it because they've got a winner's board for the gold medal, which is nice.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I always enjoy
the gold medal. I've embarrassed myself many times in this podcast, but is that not one of the oldest amateur tournaments in the world?
Yeah, well, they say it is. I think the boys at Glasgow would fight you about that because of the Tennant Cup. I think they should probably just settle it with a dust-up, shouldn't they, and decide who's the oldest. But it's certainly right up there, and the actual medal is very impressive. You don't get to keep it, of course, because it's very old, but it's a lovely thing to win. And my sister-in-law is from through there. So it's always nice to have bragging rights on her stomping ground as well, my brother's wife. And also had a local caddy. My dad had a pal. In fact, my mum and dad used to watch me everywhere. My dad was really keen on golf and wanted me to do well. And they were away at a wedding the weekend that I won the gold medal. And my dad's pal was caddying for me, and he was from Kirkcaldy. So that was nice, and he was well known at the club, so that was nice. But yeah, the first time I won the Order of Merit event, my dad wasn't there, sadly.
Wow! And the thing that's, and I looked at the sort of timelines, Stevie, and obviously I don't know it down pat, but you're fitting this in while you're working, right? And you're not even working in Scotland at that point. So
yeah,
how are you managing to do this?
Well, I convinced myself. Now, whether it was just power of positive thinking or Jedi mind tricks, but I would go and play well somewhere. There was a couple of years I played very consistently, and I used to hang my clubs up on the Sunday, and on the basis that if I don't do anything silly, just go to my work, keep my nut down, when I pick them up again on the Saturday, there is no reason at all that I should play worse than I did last Sunday. So I would just turn up on the Saturday and go again. So it was very rare I would hit a ball Monday to Friday.
Wow. So when you were working in London, right?
Yeah, I was travelling a bit. I was down south, and I was all over the place. But yeah, there was no midweek golf at all. But as I said, I'd convinced myself, hey, I might not have practiced, but I shouldn't be any worse than I was last Saturday. So let's just go again, and did that for a period of time. And did it pretty
plenty of us trying to put that into practice, Stevie, but to actually achieve it and play at the level you're talking about, which is playing in national events, so I'm guessing things like Scottish stroke play, British amateur, European competitions.
It's funny you should mention the Scottish stroke play, because that's the kind of one that got away for me, the Scottish stroke play. I've always believed, I know I don't want to sound too new age, but I've always believed in, and I had this conversation with Gary Wolstenholme one time, I'm a great believer in biorhythms. I think there's times of the year that you just play well. And for me, it coincided with the Scottish stroke play. So for about 3 or 4 years in the Scottish stroke play, I was like hardly off the podium. I think I finished fourth once. Well, I was fourth once, I was third, I was bronze medal, and then I got 2 silver medals. I lost a playoff, and that was in the space of like 4 years. And it just came at the same time every year. That was one of my regrets. I would like to have won. I did, to be honest. A couple of the bronze medal was at St Andrews, and the ranking won it out the park. I think I got a silver at Lossiemouth, and Lorne won it out the park. And I lost a playoff at Nairn, but I didn't do too much wrong. It's not like I'd made a mess of it or anything. The guy just made a birdie, and hey, that's what happens. But I'd like to have got over the line with one of them. So that I wouldn't say that's so much a regret. I think the only regret I have from golf was not really something that I had any control over. But in '97, the time I spoke about when I won the gold medal, and there was a bit of a hole in the squad, so they were looking for some folk. My one of my great pals, who I know you know, is Robert Jenkins, who at the time played at Crowwood. So Rob and I have been pals forever. So one of my only regrets was not something I had any control over, but as I said, there was a bit of a hole in the squad when a lot of the guys turned pro. Yeah. And Robert was a great pal of mine, and we were in the squads together leading up to that. But I'll tell you a couple of funny stories about they decided to do a fitness thing, and we were at a squad thing in St Andrews. And I never quite understood this, because I understand fitness, right? I understand that in order to play top level golf, if you're fitter, it's better. Right? I'm not an idiot. I understand that. We all understand that. But, making you arrive for your work on a Friday and then run around St Andrews once isn't going to get it done, right? So anyway, we set off for this run around St Andrews, and Big Rab and I were at the back of the peloton, and then I said, big man, I'm going to slide up here. I know my way around St Andrews. I'm on a wee shortcut. So you can't do that. So anyway, I made off. Sat in a wee park for about 20 minutes and caught the boys up when they came back round. Yeah, finished looking fresh as a daisy. That was the trip, I think, that big Fraser McLaughlin.
Yeah, Big Fuzz.
From Wishaw. They'd said to him about the fitness thing, and he said he couldn't do it because he had a problem with his feet. Right. And they said, what's the problem with your feet? And he said, they keep walking into the chippy. I always remember. Good time.
That sounds exactly like Fraser, and I tell you, he's no struggling for fitness these days.
I've seen him, he's an absolute tank, isn't he? Good on him, man. Good on him.
Yeah, fitness is not a challenge for the big man.
No, it is not. But anyway, Big Rab, so there was a right good chance that Robert was going to get into the team, right? I'm sure if you speak to him and ask him, his memory should be similar. It was the sad day that Princess Diana died, and it was the Southeast District Championship, and I was mid-table maestro, man. I was pretty rotten, but I'd made the cut and I was there. In fact, that was the day that I didn't have a great temper on the golf course. It was strange. I used to go a bit crazy, which is not like me because I don't live like that. So it must have been something that just got under my skin a bit, trying too hard or something. But anyway, I was just about teach my pro bag who was the boss, And just as I was taking the big swing to give it the full beans, Big Rab appeared round a bush and just waggled the finger at me and shouted, "Temper, temper, wee man, temper, temper." And then I just burst out laughing, and it calmed me right down. It was funny. But anyway, he was...
It saved you 3 new golf clubs. That's a good part.
It did. But it's amazing how even when you're gone, if one of your pals gets you, you're like, "What am I doing, man? What am I doing?" It was awful funny. But he was in a playoff for that with, from memory, Simon Mackenzie, and it was at West Linton. I think the first hole's a par 3, or maybe it was the playoff holes was 17 or 18. It was a par 3 away from the clubhouse.
18, that's a par 3, yeah.
Right. So my recollection of it was Big Rab tugged it a wee bit and there was a fence and he was up against a fence and he ended up losing the playoff to Simon. And my one regret about that is I think if he'd won that, him and I might have ended up playing foursomes together in that game against Italy. And that would have been nice because I was lucky enough. I did end up playing foursomes with, obviously your teammates become your friends, but I ended up playing foursomes with one of my friends, Johnny King, played at Cardress, and him and I played. There won't be many folk I wouldn't imagine have done that. We played for Cardress and Dumbartonshire and Scotland as foursomes partners.
Wow.
Which is a nice
That's
thing
very
to do.
That's very unusual.
And we beat some good guys as well. Johnny's a great player. In fact, he's still a really good player. He's kept playing right through, and he hits it. If he hears this, no offence, Johnny, but you definitely hit it better now than you used to. He really gives it a rip now, that's for sure. And that was nice. That was a nice thing to be able to do as well.
Absolutely.
We beat Alvaro Quiros and Gonzalo Fernandez Castaño in an away game against Spain, Johnny and I.
Talk about somebody giving it a rip, Alvaro Quiros.
I actually remember we beat them. We were about 3 up after 3. I don't speak great Spanish, but I heard Gonzo saying to Alvaro going up the 4th hole. I mean, we'd done some crazy stuff, like I'd hold a big, huge part of the first.
Surprise!
Surprise! Johnny had missed the green at the second. It was like a 2-iron par 3. He'd missed the green and it was dead, and I'd hold it.
Win wedge?
Believe it or not, with a flop shot, even though flop shots are for idiots, as you know.
Tell me the flop shots are for idiots.
Yeah, well they are. But that day it was the only option, and flopped it into the hole. And we'd played some rubbish stuff and we were 3 up after 3. And Gonzo had said to Alvaro, "If we lose the 4th, I'm going to walk in." And he was a bit of a feisty character, Gonzo, so there was a chance that he would do it. And I'd hit, it was a par 5 and a power chunk to long iron, like just a wee chip and chase, and it ran right up to about 6 or 7 feet, a big massive break on it. And Johnny had this putt to go 4 up through 4, and to see if Gonzo was going to walk off. And it was a horribly difficult putt, but it just missed and we halved, so we never got to see if he walked off. But we ended up beating them down the last at Costa Ballina. It was a dog leg in the right to left, and from memory there was water up the left, and the cover I think was 300 metres. So it wasn't something we could do. I think I'd punted a 2-iron up the corner, and Johnny hit a 7 on the green. It was that kind of hole for us. And Alvaro pulled it off the tee, and Johnny and I were looking like, yeah, fine, we're done here, great news. And he'd blown it over the drink at 330 yards.
Wow.
And that's it. Yeah, that's a long time ago. I mean, that would be... Well, I played my last international match in 2002, so that might have been with a Titleist professional ball. It might have been a Pro V1, but and I mean this ball stayed hit. That's for sure. That was
sounds like it. Huh?
Yeah. But anyway, they chunked onto the green. We beat them 1 up. That was good times. I remember that one quite vividly.
Yeah, no wonder.
So no, it was good. But my memory of all this stuff is always like the team thing. I mean, one of one of the ultimate highs I got from playing golf, international golf, was when George Crawford got his first cap, and I might be doing him a disservice, but I think it might have been his only cap. I think he only played once for Scotland. He went on to be a very successful Scottish team captain, as you probably know. But he played his either his first or his only international match at Glasgow Gales.
Wow!
I think against Spain, and I played in that team, and it was just brilliant. George had been a really good, like I mentioned earlier on, guys that are good players for long periods of time and just don't get that final step, and George did. I can't remember what events he won to get into it, but he'd won something and ended up playing, and he was so proud of it. It's actually one of the very few team photos that I still have. I have them all, but I have some on display, and that's one of them, because we were getting a photo taken and everybody's just laughing. It was one of those ones. It was just fantastic. That was a great time and great to see. So it's always the team stuff I remember. I really do. And I played the home internationals at Royal County Down, which was great as well. My caddy that week tied a Celtic scarf to my bag on the Monday, and I was absolutely petrified to say anything to him, so I played the whole week with a Celtic scarf tied to my bag at Royal County Down, because I was like, what are we going to say?
Where did I take this? Let's just move on. We'll keep strolling.
Yeah, that was actually quite funny. In my head, he was called Brian, and I was quite pleased that I remember his name. So I was, thanks, Brian. Here you go, Brian. Here's a towel, Brian. Thanks, Brian. Here's the 5-iron, Brian. And at the end of the week, we gave them some money or tipped them some money. And I heard his pal shouting over, "Hey, Robert!" And he turns round and I go, I've been calling you Brian all week. Is your name Robert? He said, my name's Robert. I said, well, I've called you Brian like 50 times a day. Why didn't you tell me? And he said, I'll always stick in my head in this, Ross. It was bizarre. He said to me, I didn't think it mattered. And I said, well, your name doesn't matter. And he went, no. And I thought, oh, fair enough then. And he took his Celtic scarf and away he went.
That's a biller.
That was County Down. But I remember holding a good putt in the last there. I played a guy called Lee Harpin from Wales, and I played him 2 years in a row, or 3 years in a row. But anyway, we had like 2 half games, and then he beat me 1 down, and it was like incredible games. We were just basically the same standard. That it just so happened we're from different countries, but we were the same standard. And I hold one on the last green at County Down for a half game. And it was the last match out there, and all the boys were standing, and it's stuff like that. I mean, it's only 1 putt, but I remember that because in that, and you always get big crowds in Ireland. There was probably 1,500 folk there, and at that time you feel like you're a proper player, a proper superstar. So I enjoyed that. It's nice to have these wee men, and of course it had to be a putt, because that was my thing, and still is.
Hope you enjoyed the first episode with Stevie Carmichael there, everyone. In the next episode, Stevie will be taking us through what he's doing today at Trackman. We'll talk about some of the game we had at Wentworth and some of the stories there, and really just catch up on Stevie's enjoyment of golf and what he's doing next. In the meantime, I'd love you to like, share and subscribe to the podcast, and you'll hear from me soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.